Today we are joined by Senior Advocate Sidharth Luthra, a distinguished voice in Indian criminal law who has spent decades at the highest level of Indian legal system, handling some of the country's most complex and closely followed criminal matters. He is the kind of lawyer who can actually write a playbook on the advocacy. He is also someone who strongly believes that courtroom is not just about outcomes and winning, it is also about people, life, and the constant negotiations you make. You mentioned that it does matter where you start from, and you are somebody who's deeply rooted in his culture and values, and is it evident from here also? How much impact does your childhood, your environment on the professional you are today? And what sort of a student were you? Were you the disciplined one, debater, last time survivor, or something entirely different?
So I did fairly well in school. I'd say fairly well in my school studies, both at the 10th and the 12th board level. In my undergrad, I did averagely. In law also, I was okay. I was not a topper in my law. But I had enough on my experience sheet to make sure that I got an admission at the University of Cambridge, the Institute of Criminology. That time, marks was not the only criteria. I must also tell you that early on, I developed a variety of interests. So in my school, theatre was an interest, it was a passion. Sports was a passion. I used to play for my school. I played state level sports. And I continued to play state level sports. So my sports were athletics, long distance running, swimming, also for school, athletics for school, football for school, and judo at a state level. At a state level, I've been a silver medalist at the state and been a university champion, gold medalist, has also been a national selectee. So these were the kind of things that brought me up. I come from a family where there was an emphasis on rootedness, on culture. There was an emphasis on learning learning about classical music, about literature, philosophy, religion. But yet there was an openness. So it's not that, you were constricted. Yeah. So in my younger days, while I was in university, in Hindu college, I was also an announcer. Oh, wow. I did 3 years. I was an announcer with Delhi B, with I think Q1 it was called, and the national channel, so the General Overseas Service. And then when the national channel started for about a year and a half, I was on the national channel as well. In fact, it used to have its office in Nehru Stadium, where I used to practice judo as well. So I did that. I used to write weekly columns, initially with a friend. Then thereafter, I continued to write, and I still continue to write occasionally. But I was fairly prolific writer. And maybe I should have gone into journalism, and I'm in the wrong line of work. Maybe I should have. Actually, the one place I wanted to do was I wanted to get into architecture. Okay. So in my 11th and 12th, I should have gone into architecture, but nobody guided me enough. That time the options were engineering, medicine. I did my school last 11th and 12th in science, but non-medical, technical drawing. And I dare say I used to enjoy it and I was fairly good at it. But it's the way it is. One didn't have that much guidance. And then I got into maths honors because at that time I thought about doing maths and becoming an academic. I always wanted to follow a passion in teaching. I still teach and I enjoy it most. So I taught in Delhi University in 1997. I've taught at Jindal for a year. I've taught at National Law University. I'm right now chair professor, the KLO chair on comparative criminal law at NLU Delhi, and it's a 2-year term. And we're doing some research projects. In fact, one of the research projects is, as on date, on my desk. I'm also trying to co-author a couple of books, 3 books actually. 2 are at a fairly decent pace. One is slow, but it'll get there.
Before we started recording...
3 books.
Oh, wow.
Sorry.
Before we started recording, you were on a call and immediately still discussing your work. How do you find time for all of this?
So everybody
Hmm.
has a finite number of hours in the day. When I was young, when I was new into the profession, initial years, didn't have enough work. So I had a lot of time. I would do a lot more reading. One would go deep into things because there was time, there was little work and time. And then it reached a point where the work increased and improved, and one had more work. So you were really trying to cut corners on sleep, not the healthiest of options, I must say this. Though I did it. I used to sleep 4.5, 5 hours a day. Not a great option, but I did it. I lost my father early on when I joined the profession. He was a very eminent lawyer of his time. And therefore, my struggles were there. Like a lot of people who don't have parents in the profession, people assume that because my father was a senior successful lawyer, things were easy for me. They were not. Because his friends were possibly kind to me, but people who did not, perhaps, had a ideological difference, were not always very kind to me, and he was not there to protect me. So I had my own share of struggles and no regrets. My wife and I used to live a very simple life. Not that our life is very much complicated. It's just that now, in terms of the ability to obtain material objects or to choose to go on a nice holiday, it's not something one thinks about. At that time, you had to think about how every penny every rupee had to be spent. But they were happy times. Happiness is always within. It will not come to you from only obtaining fancy clothes, fancy watches, fancy cars. You can, if you enjoy them, why not? But happiness is a internal emotion, and this is something which I learned from the late Ghulam Bahanvati on law. But I think I've applied this, and I try and apply this to my life. Anything you do, and in the profession, you read, you prepare, but do you give yourself time for introspection? So Mr. Vanvati told me an anecdote about a lawyer, brilliant lawyer of the Bombay High Court, who was asked, he says, well, how do you prepare for a matter? He would say that I read my files in the evening and night. In the morning, when I sip my tea, read my newspaper, sometimes I just sit out and enjoy the sea breeze. I think about the cases and how I will deal with them, how I will frame my points, having prepared the evening before. And even to the extent that if a lawyer on the opposite side is rude to me, how I will snub him or her and teach them a lesson. But that is, of course, one extreme. The point is this: one should not necessarily snub your colleagues. That's not advocacy. You should not be diffident. My late father's guru taught him, "Vakil wo banega jo na thakega, na hakega, na bakega." So you should have stamina. Thakna nahi chahiye. You should not hesitate. Hakna nahi chahiye. And bakna nahi chahiye means don't be verbose. Don't speak more than you do. Everybody who speaks more and doesn't measure their thoughts. I'm not saying being calculated, but you must measure what you're going to say. There's no point saying things just for the sake of saying them.
Right.
One has to be able to, after all, even in interpersonal relationships, you're talking with your colleagues, you're talking with your family members, you're talking with your staff. You have to be sensitive to their point of view.
So these are the non-negotiable traits for lawyers.
I think these are good traits for human beings. Why just lawyers?
Right.
I think for lawyers, again to quote my late father, 80% hard work, 20% intelligence. And as as Shakespeare said, you have to have the devil inside you to succeed in this profession. Look, destiny may or may not smile on you. But today, the opportunity in the way the profession is developed is there for a lot of our younger colleagues to do very well. There are so many varieties of work. In our time, what are the options? You either litigated on the civil side, the criminal side, or the taxation side. IPR was coming. I'm talking to you. I joined profession in 1991. And IPR was just there, but it was not that active. And not the way it is today. And there was some little semblance of company law, commercial law. It is like an overlap of civil law. So you either litigated or you got a corporate job, let's say the company like Levers, they used to have the best legal team, or you got into a bank or a public sector as a legal officer, or lastly, you could be a law professor. And then, of course, there were those who gave the magistracy exam immediately after law college, became a magistrate, or 10 years later became a session judge, or later still went to the High Court. So these are the various, career options. Today, there are so many specialities, subspecialties, and subspecialties. So in sports law also there are subspecialties. Right. In media law also there are subspecialties. In corporate law, in policy, in government engagement, today lawyers are actually advising government and be paid for it to frame legislation, to frame subordinate rules and regulations. There are think tanks who are working and doing research and provided not only governments but corporations information. So and then there's of course this whole thing about lawyers who are doing startups on AI and on software. So all of these never existed when we began the profession. So what I was saying was today there are so many options, but the challenge I find for a lot of my young colleagues who possibly have a much larger worldview than people of my generation, who've seen more of the world, who've traveled, who have had more access through technology, through television, through technology, through the internet, to things that are happening all over the world, is that do they really spend time on reflection and contemplation? That little beast which you're holding in your hand, your mobile phone, is the one that detracts from our spending time alone. So for me also, between 2011 and 19, we have a home in the hills, and I used to spend substantial time there with my late mother, with my family, and sometimes even alone. And that's the time when I started looking inwards more. Now, you may say I've become an old man before my time. My sisters often tease me that I became an old man before my time. But I think that helped me develop as a person and also as a professional. Recently, when my colleagues and I say we, because though I was the one articulating the arguments in the 9-judge bench on Sabrimala, but I will say my colleagues and I argued the matter because we all sat, it was a 2-month process. So the argument was about 43 minutes to be precise, with questions and answers. But over a 2-month process, we tried to develop a thought process as to I was going to be, after the petitioners finished, I had to be the fourth or fifth or sixth lawyer to argue. So one had to have a larger worldview, know the whole issue, but at the same time, try and cull out things which would be special or specific to you so that you were not repeating what others have said. And the other thing which I find about advocacy, which sometimes pains me these days, is why do people read their written submissions? Judges are very hardworking. I believe, they always read the submissions we file. So it is a little unfortunate when a lot of us will, during a hearing of a matter, prepare a written note and then start reading it out. Our job is, and that is what the client engages you for, to articulate, to speak, and when you speak and you articulate, there is an interaction where questions may come from the bench and you will respond to them.
Right.
But to come back to what I was saying, so over a 2-month process, we must have spent, my colleagues spent possibly more human hours, but I would have spent about 20 hours, 15, 20 hours just reading, and maybe more than that, because one has read a lot of these judgments before. 15, 20, maybe 30 hours, 40 hours reading. Then discussing, we must have spent about 15, 20 hours. Then preparation of the submissions took about another 20 hours. Then from the written submission which we filed a second written submission. That took another 20 hours, give or take. And I'm talking about 20 hours of a number of people, not just me. I may spend 2-3 hours, but others spend many more on the written submissions. And then finally, the day The day before we had to argue, the preparation started 2 days prior to start distilling the written submissions into what would be argued over about a 10-hour period. And finally, in the next morning, I spent about an hour and a half, 2 hours. I didn't take any cases that day. I didn't take any cases. And I sat and then I rewrote my handwritten notes based on what I'd thought over, partly in my sleep and possibly my dreams and the early morning hours, and further distilled the note. So it's a process. And I must tell you, I'm not saying I work very hard. There are people who work much harder than me. The greats of this profession, Mr. Fali Nariman, Mr. Shanti Bhushan, Mr. Ramjit Nani, their diligence was to another level. My late father, Mr. P.R. Vakil from Bombay, Soli Surabji Saab, they are a different level of, the ones I've seen, different level of preparation.
I was reading one of your interviews where you've actually mentioned, your father said once that you have to be so good and thorough that nobody can lay a finger on you. And that's the approach which you followed even when you were preparing for Sabrimala matter and for any matter for that case.
I try and do that as far as possible, as much as possible. And there are some times when I feel that I have been unable to do my best despite the preparation. There may be various factors. Maybe, you were not able to answer the court's questions as effectively as you should have, or respond with a more creative argument which comes to you the moment you start walking out of court. Now, at that time, I find myself to be my own best critic, and I won't say worst, my best critic, because then I often go through a feeling of despondency as to what has gone wrong. And this happens. And therefore, one has to be able to reflect even before and after the process. What could you have done better? In fact, I have the challenge is for me now is that I've been doing this for 35 years, and my colleagues in the chamber now are people who may have 3, 4, 5, maybe 7, 8 years practice, 10 years practice at the most. So the age gap is increasing. And very often they are in they're almost diffident in speaking their minds. And that's a very unfortunate thing, because who else will correct me other than them? So I have to keep requesting and reminding them, please tell me when I'm wrong. Please tell me what I did wrong. Don't tell me what I didn't right. I don't want the praise. I want to know where I messed up. Because if you guys don't tell me where I messed up, then how will I ever correct myself the next time round?
That's right.
And that is, I think, in life and in law, we must learn from our mistakes to try and minimize the mistakes. Nobody's perfect. You're always going to do things which are, you are going to make errors. But with experience and with knowledge and hard work, to minimize those errors. And that's what one has to achieve for.
So it never happens that once you've left the courtroom or your office, that you have to put a switch off on your mind, or you are always contemplating about the arguments, testimonies which you have to work on, or like you mentioned, even in your dreams, you're thinking about the matter you are supposed to argue or you have argued.
No, I do switch off because my time spent with family is time switched off. I try and get some exercise in the form of yoga or with a trainer of a couple of years now every day. Or if I love walking, so when I'm walking. And earlier, I used to sometimes work post dinner also, but of late, for certain personal reasons, once I finish my work in the office, I finish my work for the day. I may think about it, work about it in the morning, but I try and close my files when I leave office. So that's done, unless I have some additional reading or 1 or 2 files which come in late for the next morning. Then those meetings will happen in the morning. But otherwise, you have to give your time. The mind has to switch off. A mind which is constantly churning will never be calm, and calmness is essential for clarity of thought.
You shouldn't have chaotic mind.
If you have a mind which is overburdened, that's what I said. time for reflection. You may watch a serial, you may watch MasterChef.
Right.
You may listen to music, you may take a walk, you may read a book. I love reading. My private collection of books has a few thousand books, a lot of which I've read, which have nothing to do with the law. The history, politics, philosophy, even some old comics, which I enjoy reading.
So if there is no discussion about law, what is the other topic you
So-
enjoy talking about?
So, so in our home, we would discuss. My daughter is very fond of art, so she brings in a lot of knowledge about art. We discuss. So there are lots of topics to discuss: family, friends, books one has read, uh, things that have happened in the day. Sometimes, anecdotes, a humorous moment. There is so much to do. I mean, I'll tell you this. One of the problems that besets our generation is get off. You travel in a flight, you get off. The first thing you do is you start
Checking
being
your phone.
obsessive on
Yeah.
your phone. I enjoy driving, and I drive to the hills occasionally. I drive to a farm close by to Delhi. And for me, that's lovely because I enjoy the drive, enjoy looking at the trees, nature, plants, birds. These days, there are a lot of birds in this summer. So in the morning, when one wakes up, you wake up to the chirping of birds. So it's always nice to sit and listen to them, enjoy it. Just be.
Just be present.
Just be. Just be. You must also keep in mind that when you're younger as a lawyer, there are a lot of financial struggles, there are constraints. So one of the reasons is you're trying to do work because you need the revenue.
Right.
There you have to be a little sensible. You must expand your practice, but at the same time, don't expand your expenditure to a point where you are running around just trying to gather money. You will reach, and not maybe in the first 2 years, maybe in first 10 years or whatever, or 5 years, one will reach a balance between when the revenue stream is enough for you to do a lot more quality and areas which are more of your interest or your expertise.
It gives you freedom.
Yes, so everything in life. There's a legend about the Buddha where a man comes without any food in his stomach, dirty clothes, and he walks into the ashram in the sangha. And the priests there tell him, "What do you want?" So he says, "I want a meal and I want a bath." And they said, "All right, we'll give you a meal and a bath, but first you want to come into the sangha, you must recite certain phrases. And you must recite the prayer so we feel that you're worthy enough to join the sangha or to enter the premises." So he keeps trying, keeps forgetting, and then they start yelling at him and saying, "You're a beast, you're a man not worthy of entry into the sangha." So the Buddha is passing by and he says, "What is happening?" So they explain to him the problem, and he calls that gentleman and says, "Come with me, brother. What is it? Where have you come from?" So he tells his story. He says, "All right, you're not fed. You seem need a bath. First go have a bath, change your clothes, have a meal, then we'll talk." So man comes back after an hour, having been bathed, fed, cleaned up, washed up. And the Buddha takes him to the garden and they start chatting. In a little while, the man is reciting along with the Buddha without forgetting any of the shlokas. So the priests and the others in the Sangha are surprised and they ask him, "Why? How did this happen?" And the answer is right, that first you have to feed the body before you feed the mind or the soul. Today, if the body is not fed, in our time things were different. When you joined practice in 1991, most seniors would not pay. And I remember joining a law firm. My salary was the princely sum of 1,250 rupees a month after having come back with a degree from Cambridge. Made no difference. I got an opportunity. Later on, they increased it to 1,500 a month. But people didn't get paid, and as I said, a lot of seniors didn't pay. So people used to really struggle. And that is the reason at that time you had only those people those youngsters who could sustain themselves from their families would come, because you may possibly take as many as 5 years to sustain yourself. And then you need to be sustained by your family till you could reach a point where you were earning yourself. Now today, things have changed because the amount of work has increased, litigation has increased, population has increased. As a result of which, a lot of youngsters can do better. Also, I think we've also become more conscious that since we are earning better, so why should we not pay our juniors better? And I think it's a travesty if you are being unfair to your juniors and your staff.
But I'm glad that's how you think. But uh, in these times, also, juniors or young lawyers are often told that in your initial years, you should focus on learning the ropes of law and not on money, without realizing that people come from a certain background and money might be a factor.
So I think
It's still prevalent.
It is prevalent, but I think, you also have to realize that you and I are sitting in Delhi.
Right.
Delhi is not India. The metros are not India. A youngster who goes to a Mufassil court will have to be paid in terms of what his senior is earning.
Right.
The salaries there are not necessarily the salaries you get here. So I'll give you an example. Way back in the year 94, I went to Etawah to do a case, and the client was paying me the princely sum of 2,200 rupees to travel for the day to Etawah. And back it was good money, not bad. We stayed in a hotel room which was very basic, very clean and neat, nice. It was 105 rupees cooler room. And when you stepped out of the room, they would shut off the cooler to save electricity. Etawah is a very hot place in the summer. And we briefed the senior most lawyer there. I think his name was Mr. Dubey. Very learned man, wonderful library, very, very knowledgeable man. And when we asked him to appear in the court, so he said, Sidharth, I charge a lot of money for a sessions trial, which is like a murder trial. It's a long, drawn process. So I said, sir, how much would you charge? So he says, look, it's 11,000 rupees for the trial. Now, I charged 2,200 to go there. So I was very embarrassed because the gentleman was very learned and very senior. So I said, sir, we've not come to you for the trial because I know you will not go to the magistrate's court again. But please tell me, what will you charge? So with a lot of hesitation, he asked for 500 rupees. I would have happily paid. I would have told the client happily to pay more. But he was very happy with that. And this was 94. Now, therefore, a senior who's charging in those days 11,000 for a sessions trial will obviously pay his junior lesser money. But then that's commensurate to the living cost in a smaller place.
Right.
So these variations are going to happen. So the metros have become normally well paid, and normally, as I said. But I believe it is important, and most important, I learned one thing from the late Arun Jaitley Saab. When he became senior, and I tried to replicate it with my staff also, he made it a point that all the clerkage that is collected is kept in a manner where 60% of the clerkage is distributed to the staff as bonuses, and 40% is kept for their capital expenditure. Let's say somebody wants to get married, somebody wants to, buy a home. Right. And that is the reason he made sure that all his staff were very well settled within his lifetime. And I think that's something I've also tried to emulate, and some people do emulate that, because that's the way, your staff will work for you you may do a 12-hour or 10-hour day. The staff work at least 2 to 3 hours. They will travel from 20, 30 kilometers away. They are trying to bring up their families. Their families have to sacrifice because they're working long hours. Why should you not be fair to them? Why should you not be fair to the colleague, the youngster who works? If you do a 12-hour day or a 14-hour day, the youngsters do an 80-hour day. But so that's something which I believe is very important for seniors who are doing well, comfortably well. You must ensure that you pass the fruits of your success also to those, because in any profession, and in our legal profession also, everything you do is a team effort. Yeah. One person may vocalize the argument, but it's a team effort that makes the ultimate product work.
True. That's very true.
So before we started, there is a very a banter between you and your staff. So what is the relationship you share with your staff, and how important it is for any lawyer to have a very, supportive or loyal staff to grow or build even a practice for that matter?
So, junior lawyers in a senior counsel's chamber will come and go, but your staff is there forever. I believe a majority of my success and my ability to perform under pressure and at different times and achieve levels of efficiency are exclusively and purely because of the support I get from my staff. They are like the charioteers, and I'm like the horse which they make run. And they do a great job of looking after me. They will also ensure, you know, if on a given day I'm missing lunch, then my one of my clerks will tell me, "Aapne lunch nahi khaya," or they'll get me water when they realize that I'm thirsty. And I tell you, I don't need to tell them this. They're just very nice people. I mean, they've been with me over, some have been there 2 decades, 3 decades. We've had staff, the oldest staff we had from my father's time is my dad's old clerk who's been with us since 1981. And all of them, to say that they are like family is not fair because they are family. They are the ones who enable me or any lawyer to perform to the best of their ability. And this is something we much respect because they will work. If we do a 12-hour day or 10-hour day, they will work another 2 hours. They commute. Their families have to face sacrifices because of the hours they spend managing a lawyer in a lawyer's gym. So I think it's for any lawyer, any modicum of success is only possible by having a core strong team, both in terms of lawyers, but most important in terms of the staff that support you.
You cannot think. I don't think any lawyer can think about functioning without a clock.
It's not just a clerk, whether it be my secretary, my accountant. So every time I travel, my secretary has always sent an intimation and ensured that I have security covered wherever I'm going from the local police. I'm trying to get that. As also gets the number, shares the number, and she's not. And this is not a 9 to 6 or 9 to 7 job. This will happen sometimes at night, sometimes in the morning, and she will tie it all up so much so that the PSO who was to pick me up at the next airport within India is tied up with the taxi or the vehicle that is to pick me up, and they both are together at the same time. It's streamlined. I, I God bless them all. They're whatever I achieve is really because of my staff and support from my family, of course, and colleagues.
So I would like to go back to uh, a boy from Delhi who was into mathematics. What pulled him into criminal law? How did that start? When was the first time you entered the criminal law practice?
So the boy from Delhi wanted to be an academic. He thought he'll be an engineer, didn't like did the classes for a bit, brilliant tutorials, didn't enjoy them, and let go. Then this young man from Delhi did maths, found it too dry, switched to law, wanted to be an academic, and started out as a commercial civil lawyer. I worked with the Senior company for a year. And then my grandfather was not well, so my father said that I had to leave and, look after him as well. We were staying with my grandfather in Defense Colony at our home. So I used to manage my time because I had to stay up in the night with him and then go to work in the morning. So did that, and then I was doing basically civil commercial practice. I was a suited booted lawyer. I've set up companies. I've done some industrial licensing. I used to enjoy that part of the work. Commercial work, arbitration, civil litigation. And then in 96 October, my father had some health issues. And then December of 96, he fell ill. Also what happened was in 94, one of my father's very old associates of 31 years left and started his own practice. He was doing his own practice, but he decided to set up his independent place completely. And when he left, then my dad had one or two people because he used to always keep few juniors. And he started roping me into some of his work. So I used to assist, but I used to resist. In fact, I kept a junior, who's now senior counsel himself, 2 juniors. And that gentleman would try and work more with my dad, though he was supposed to look after my civil work while I would assist my father. So I did some criminal work from 95 onwards. And as I said, 96 December. 19th December was the last time my father in that year came to court. Then he came for a week in 97, passed away in early May 97. And suddenly there was his work. It had to be coordinated because the clients had faith in him. He was active, but he was not being able to attend court. So people would come, take advice, and then I used to be coordinating between some senior or the other who used to be briefed. So I did that for a while, and then suddenly my father passed away, which was very shocking because he went very early. I lost my grandfather to his father just 4 years prior. And a lot of the clients who had been looking after or, coordinating with for the last 5 months after my father fell ill until his demise, they felt some were just very kind, but they, barring 2 files, I was able to retain all the others, and I would brief other seniors, but I was doing those matters. And then the question was, do I switch from my existing civil practice to this? So I did. It was a crisis, but I took it as a challenge. And the challenge has worked out well for me because from a civil commercial practitioner, I had to switch overnight, learn the ropes, look at my old father's notes, my father's old notes and his files, try and decipher why he had put question marks in certain places in a file or why he'd starred something, and try and comprehend and try and read those files myself. So challenging, but life will always throw you curveballs.
Right.
And either you're up to the challenge or you're not. And sometimes there's another secondary principle that, you will sometimes walk into a room full of doors. One door is easily open. That was my civil practice door. And the other door was the criminal law work door, which, since I was getting that opportunity, and I also felt that, I had a commitment to the people who had expressed confidence in me, I started doing that. So for a while, I was doing both work. And then over a period of time, my practice became predominantly on the criminal side. But since I do a lot of commercial crime, white-collar crime, there's an overlay with civil commercial law, so it worked out very well for me.
But so criminal law exposes you to the dark side of the human nature. Do you think it's emotionally overwhelming as well to practice criminal law?
Litigation often exposes you to the dark side of human nature, whether it be criminal or civil. The simple thing is, why do people litigate? People litigate for 2 reasons. One, you or I would litigate if somebody was taking away our rights.
Right.
Then you're fighting for justice. Sometimes people will file a case against you to claim something which is not their due. You have to then face that litigation, don't you? And then there are people who will litigate to deprive others of their rights. So this is the kind of system, this is the kind of personalities you're going to deal with. The question is, are you going to be like गंदे पानी में कमल होता है ना, तो या आप कमल बन सकते हो या आप कीचड़ बन सकते हो.
Right.
You have to decide whether you're the lotus or you are the dirt in the pond, the algae in the pond.
You've also mentioned that whosoever is entering into criminal practice, it's important to have an experience of a civil trial. Why do you think that a criminal practice alone wouldn't suffice?
So it's a very simple answer. Today, principles of the pleadings, which was a civil law concept, has creeped into criminal law. A. B. A majority of the work in the criminal law field is quasi-criminal, quasi-civil law, commercial issues. Thirdly, there are a lot of regulatory issues which are really in the domain of both criminal, civil, commercial, technical issues. So therefore, these, having done civil practice, according to me, you will have a more rounded, a more robust approach to your criminal practice. It's also more well informed. I think in the older days, today, we have lawyers who are very niche.
Yeah.
And sometimes they miss the larger picture. Now, I've grown up seeing a lot of lawyers who had a wide exposure to a variety of laws. So while they may not have been an expert, a civil commercial lawyer of top would not have been an expert on taxation law, but he or she would have enough of a working knowledge to be able to tell the client that while I'm advising on this strategy, I believe this area needs to be addressed, get a specialist on board. The tragedy today is that we have started working in silos. We become very unidimensional. So in a civil litigation, if they're parallel civil and criminal litigation, some people will take a defense which may be great for the civil suit, but will kill you when it comes to an admission in the criminal proceeding.
Right.
That fine-tuning becomes essential. Let's say you're working on a complicated commercial issue or a taxation issue. You will need the help of a tax lawyer or a person who deals with accountancy, chartered accountant or works accountant, because they will bring a specialized domain knowledge, and it is a merging of those two experiences that will give a client a more fruitful result. One of the challenges we face is that the Indian legal profession is still isolated. We are not allowed to partner up with chartered accountants or others. I think this needs to change. We are working across jurisdictions. We are working across professional domains. And today, it's not that CAs don't do law. They deal with some aspects which are purely legal. But then they don't have the larger picture. So I think it's important for us to be more wholesome as professionals. And therefore, and please don't forget, we all tend to forget, even the government forgot, that Evidence Act applies both to civil law and criminal law. When the BSA was framed, the Bharatiya Sakshi Adhiniyam, people talked about changing the criminal laws, but hold on. The Evidence Act and the BSA applies equally to civil trials and criminal proceedings. So the principles of evidence are same, it's just that slightly different principles will be applied. In one case, it's a preponderance of probabilities in civil law. In criminal law, it's a proof beyond reasonable doubt and the burden on the prosecution. So these are the kind of nuances apart. I think it's important for a lawyer to be multidimensional, even though you're a specialist.
So, being a litigator is not a 9-to-5 job, and especially if you're on the criminal side of it. There must be a time where you've gotten a call at a very odd hour. So, is there one incident which has till date stayed with you, or it has shown you the intensity of the profession?
So I'll tell you what, when I started my profession, when I didn't have so much work, I got trained in a very interesting manner. Some of the clients who used to call me up were some were friends of my dad, some were just old elderly people who would wake up very early. They would wake me up at 6 in the morning and say, "So beta, are you up or not?" And I would be kind of crawling out of bed and said, "Yes, sir, tell me, what is it?" I wanted to discuss the matter. Can I come today or tomorrow? And at 6 o'clock in the morning, the gentleman is planning 2 days ahead, or the lady is planning 2 days ahead. So those were challenges, but you learn. I have done all-nighters in court on various occasions, including in the early years of my career. But the most recent all-nighter we did was when the CM of Andhra Pradesh got arrested in September of 2023. When I reached there on the day, was up till 12, slept from 12 till 1, slept from 1 till 3, and was back in the court at 4 a.m. and then was up the whole day till the next night. That is, I think, 8th of September 2023.
You still remember the day?
I remember the dates. I'm blessed by a good memory. Both my parents have great memories. So it's a genetic thing, nothing to do with me.
Wow. That's a crazy schedule, but I think that's all of us go through at one point of the time.
Yes, but this was, I was doing this 2 years ago, and I was 58 at the time. So, you're not as young as you were, but it was fun. And I remember when we came back that's the time of the year when Vijayawada is very, very humid. My coat, my senior jacket was drenched with sweat. I could actually squeeze the sweat out of it, but one lived in it. And you sat in the open canteen to have some food, and you had a few cups of coffee, endless cups of tea. For me, fortunately, having started my practice in the trial court, and now sitting often in the open corridors of the Supreme Court, which are very hot, heat and cold is a state of mind. It doesn't bother me. I can sit with my black coat and gown outside in the sun in the loo, even under a tree. Fortunately, it doesn't trouble me because I think my parents also brought me up to be a lot hardier. Both my parents were products of partition. They had a difficult time, and they always encourage us to be able to struggle. So for me, these things fortunately don't matter too much. You like your creature comfort, but if you're sitting today, you got the air conditioner on, we can switch off the air conditioner and sit without that for half an hour. There's no electricity, I'll be happy. Doesn't bother me.
You're accommodating.
I think well, maybe that's a nice way of putting it. I think it's just that I was brought up in a certain fashion where minor inconveniences and adversities don't shake me. Yes, I used to be very sensitive. I used to react to small stimuli, not this kind of stimuli, but I think over the years, I've also matured and become less reactive. You can ask my former juniors. I used to be a tiger 30 years ago, now I'm a pussycat.
So, you have done so many high-stake matters and of public importance. Is there one matter which is really close to your heart? And you mentioned that you were sensitive, and also you have done a lot of sensitive matters as well, where there's public interest involved, public outrage involved, just like Nirbhaya case.
So Nirbhaya was a fascinating case, but there have been quite a few. There have been quite a few matters like that, starting from the trial court till the Supreme Court. There have been always numerous challenging matters. Someday, if I live long enough to write my memoirs, you'll learn more about them. But I think some of the two challenging matters that I did was impeachments. One was the impeachment of a Calcutta judge, Justice Soumitra Sen. I was not really a conventional constitutional lawyer, so I had to learn a lot and read a lot more. I got lucky that Mr. Fali Nariman recommended my name, very kind of sir, and I got that opportunity, and I had to read a lot. For 2 or 3 weeks, I shut myself in a room with a colleague. 3 weeks. Yeah. Morning till night, I used to only read that file. I was not taking any other briefs, not doing anything. So, and that was 2000, I think 10. 9. Very challenging. That was really an experience. Nirbhaya was a different challenge. Then there was, of course, there was another judge from Madhya Pradesh. I was successful there. The committee held him guilty. The Rajya Sabha indicted him. Before the Lok Sabha could he resigned.
You have been in part of third.
I was part of the third, but now the third ended. We finally, I stopped appearing in that matter because the client took a decision to abstain from the proceeding. But the second was S.K. Ganguly, where there were very strong allegations. And here I was appearing for the judge, and we were working from a disadvantage, had to work very hard to reclaim the lost ground, and we managed to get the judge exonerated. That was a tough one also. Nirbhaya was tough in a different way because Nirbhaya, there was, I have strong views on the death penalty. I don't necessarily believe that in a country like ours, with its various imperfections, with the system being not as scientifically attuned, though I must say the Nirbhaya case was possibly the most scientific or one of the most scientific investigations I've come across. Kudos to Delhi police. They did an outstanding job. But having said that, last 3-4 weeks, I've spoken about this even earlier, when we were asking for the death penalty for one of the accused, I had doubts. So I asked my colleague, Supriya, who was assisting me, Supriya Juneja, and I told her, I said, I'm having doubts. I'm not sure whether to ask for death penalty for this one young man. And we started, she says, look, let's look at the evidence again and let's go through it. So we went through in 3 weeks again the evidence. I then re-looked at it because when I told the police officers that, look, I have my concerns, I don't think the death penalty. So they said, look, how are you saying this, sir? There'll be chaos. I said, whether there's chaos or not, my conscience has to be satisfied. But then when I re-looked at the evidence, I was clear in my mind. So these are the challenges that always come to a lawyer in matters. But I must tell you this. You know, sometimes we start drawing distinctions between a high profile and an ordinary litigant's matter. Yeah. But for the litigant, for every litigant, their matter is their life. So as a professional, the quality of service and care must be consistent. We have to ensure that we as professionals do justice to whoever we represent, poor or rich, paid or unpaid. If you take a pro bono matter, you have no business not to do it to the best of your ability. I remember my late father one day when I was 11 or 12, coming back. That time the High Court used to be in Patiala House, and he was very despondent. So I'd never seen my dad so despondent. And, you know, I tried to probe, and in the evening he told us, there was a matter where I was a amicus curiae, and I missed it. Fortunately, it has got listed tomorrow, but I'm really disturbed because how could I miss an amicus curiae matter? So he'd been appointed amicus curiae, a friend of the court, to assist and represent a poor litigant. And his sense of duty to even that poor litigant who he had never met, but only the file had come to him from the court, was that he should not have missed that matter. Fortunately, the next day he did it and eventually succeeded. And everybody in the staff got yelled at that, how did we not note the date of this matter? So I think it's important for us as professionals, and that's why it's called a noble profession. You know, it's called the cab rank rule. You know, behind the gown, there's a little, not the senior gown, the other gown, the symbol
there's
thing.
a flap.
That used to be in the old days, a sack. So every lawyer used to have a sack hung here. बोरी, अगर आप पैसे वाले हैं आप उसमें आके सोना डाल दोगे, अगर वो कम पैसे वाले उसमें चांदी डाल देंगे, तीसरा आदमी उसमें आलू या प्याज डाल देगा, but जो भी कुछ डाल के जाएगा, you have to do their case to the best of your ability. So I find this very odd these days when people tell me, how can you do this? How can you represent? What is the right side? A lawyer's job is to defend a client to the best of the abilities within the four corners of the rules of procedure, substantive law, and evidence.
But has there been a time where you know that the person might be a culprit, but you've still gone ahead and defended the person?
And there would be many times when you know that your client is not in the right, but the point is this: do I have the ability to play God? Should I play God? And how can I be so judgmental? I'll tell you, this is a question somebody asked me on Twitter, put it to me on Twitter the other day. And I said, look, the job of determining guilt or innocence is that of the judge, not of the lawyer. If you start doing that as a lawyer, either you decide to become a judge or hang up your boots.
How do you?
And I'll tell you one more thing which you must keep in mind, this is a question which is asked, especially in the field of criminal law very often. Legal ethics, our professional ethics say, represent whoever comes to you freely, fairly, and honestly to the best of your ability. Right. And if you can't do that, if you are prejudging the person, then please return their money and fees. Don't do injustice to them. I am not an activist. I feel strongly about certain things, and where I feel strongly, the way I do it is I will represent those clients or those causes pro bono. Because for me, like environment, wildlife, I'm passionate about these issues. But at the same time, that does not stop me from representing a client who's come to me to ask me to help them to the best of my abilities.
That's a fair point. That's actually, you as a lawyer, your duty is to serve your client in all capacity possible.
Absolutely right.
But I like to, but how do you emotionally detach yourself? End of the day, you are human. There might be a possibility, if it's especially any blue collar crime, not white collar crime. That's a distinct thing. How can you completely detach yourself?
So I'll give you another point. Blue collar crime, things become more nuanced. So many years ago, my dad did a judgment. I think the case is called Tensing. And if I'm not mistaken, Justice Bari's judgment, and I assisted him. This was 1 or 2 years before he passed on. It was a case where two youngsters had stabbed a gentleman. They were part of a community, I think it was the Sansi tribe near Delhi. And he had stabbed this gentleman and killed him with a scissor. Lambi wali lohe ki scissor hoti hai na, purani which tailors use.
Yeah.
And he'd taken them, opened the blade and stabbed this guy and killed him. Now, on the one hand, you would say there was murder. Why should he not be defended? Why should he be defended? Isn't he guilty? But the reason behind that incident, which he disclosed to my father, was that gentleman was a bully. His sister's husband used to work outside, and that gentleman used to keep pressurizing the sister to sleep with him. And since he was the local rowdy in the village or the tribe, he used to try and pressurize, and this girl was tormented. And one of these two 16, 17-year-old boys or 18-year-old boys decided to just protect his sister, and his friends went wrong with him. There was an acquittal in that case. But now you tell me, how do you judge the guilt of the guy? He did the offense. But there was a murder, life was lost.
Right.
How can you deny anybody a relief if you start becoming judgmental? You know, in blue collar or even crimes, there are always shades of grey. The reasons for the commission of the crime is often something which may be hidden in or covered by one of the basis emotions. It can be anger, it can be lust, it can be desire, it can be passion, it can be hatred. But there are so many nuances to these situations. And then again, two people, and I'm going to give you another example. Two people commit theft. One robs a loaf of bread because his children, or robs atta from the granary to feed his family because they're hungry. He's guilty of theft. How will you treat him?
So you have to look at the intent and the motive and the reasons behind it.
Or even the industrialist who's prosecuted because he set up an industry, he didn't make personal benefits, but he made bad decisions, and now the banks have gone after him. Should they not be defended? Or even a person who is accused of, let's say, abetment to suicide of his friend, his employee, his partner. Are you not going to defend them? Where will you draw the line? If we start drawing the line, then it's simple. Then why not we apply the rule, which applies sometimes. Some people apply it in primetime TV to declare everybody guilty, forgetting the presumption of innocence. The point is, we must have a situation where there is a set of rules we play by. We are a civilized society. We are a rule of law civilized society. We're a civilization where the rule of law has meant a lot for the last many thousand years. Irrespective of who's holding the reins of power, this country has always operated on rule of law in various, forms and shapes. And because it has, today, our democracy is stronger by the day, not weaker by the day. There may be hiccups. There may be issues. People may question some aspects of our democracy, that we're becoming less tolerant of each other. But can anybody question that the democratic process in India has not worked? The answer is no. It has gone, it has evolved, And we have a lot to teach the world. We have a lot to learn from the world. We have a lot to teach the world as well.
Do you think now public opinion enters the court before the evidence reaches there?
Of course it
Media
does.
trials.
Of course it does. Dekhiye, I'll tell you one thing. When I was a young lawyer practicing in trial court, I used to appear in Patiala sometimes. And that time the High Court had this horrible green color. And the judges would say, "Arey, वकील साहब, आज सुबह ना ये अखबार में बहुत इस केस पे आ गया है, एक सलाह मानो, हरी बिल्डिंग चले जाओ." I'm telling you this. It's a matter of fact. I have had judges from the magistrates court, from the sessions court, from the high court, even from the Supreme Court saying, "Sidharth, you guys come and argue law, but at times our instinct tells us somebody is guilty and therefore we will deny bail." But the point is, if you deny bail, you're increasing the number of under trials. Which civilized country has under trials in jail? Just because we can't do our trials fast, because our courts are overburdened or we don't have the numbers of judges, is that a justification to put people in jail for years together while they're facing trial? The answer is absolutely no. And today the challenge is, in every case that you see, media is now trying to play a larger than life role. जो उनको काम करना चाहिए वो तो करते नहीं. They should be questioning injustice. They should be questioning issues of governance. They should be questioning issues of rights. What they do is they will pick one little incident and then hammer it for 48 or 72 hours till everybody gets so, clogged in their minds with that one case that you forget that there are other challenges.
So, you have been around power, crime, cases where there is emotional volatility. Has there been time where you have faced threats, safety concerns to your life? Because when I was entering to your room, to your office here as well, there are a lot of security checks before I could enter the building as well. Does it come as a part of being a criminal lawyer that you also have to be little beware of sort of people you have to deal with or interact with?
I don't. I'll tell you what. I suffered an attempt on my life many years ago. That was in 2009, 3rd July 2009, because of some case that I had done. And thereafter, certain other things happened, as a result of which I have been kept on security cover. But it's not a pleasant experience to be under security cover. You can't even disagree with your family members in peace if you're together in a car. You can't even private argument. So there is a breach of privacy, but I think this is something that happened, and I was fortunate that the agencies had acted with alacrity, and I got lucky that I survived. I had to go and depose in a trial. I did that deposition, and a lot of the people pleaded guilty. Some were convicted, but that was a chapter of my life quite a while back. But yes, these things should not be happening. We are professionals. We will represent one party or the other. Mine was a very peculiar case, to be a conversation to be kept for another day. It's a very long, perhaps even boring conversation.
Is there any example or court moment which you can state on record, which was like a humorous in the context that during the proceeding you were like, this shouldn't be happening, but it's happening right now? Any such funny court moment you had?
So many years ago, I was appearing in the Delhi High Court, and I was arguing a bail. It was the facts are a little gross, but your viewers should know, where there was a person who had smuggled into India currency in his rectum, through his rectum, and the currency was worth about 5 lakhs of rupees. So I thought it was impossible or illogical. It was in foreign currency. The notes are, of a larger denomination. So I was very happily arguing before the judge, and I said, look, it's a human impossibility. How can they make out a case of somebody putting so much within their body and in such a manner? So the honorable judge, who had later went to much higher heights, much greater heights, who was in court, was very, very mature, very seasoned judge, turned around and told me, he says, Mr. Luthra, I sit on the Coffee Bosa board. You are not aware, but this is a common practice. We Indians are great at putting things up the rectum. It was a moment when both the judge and I answered immediately, I will have to bow to your superior knowledge. And then I thought to myself, I cringed, I said, what have I just said? And the judge also cringed in what I said. And of course, the whole court was up in laughter. But these are the moments that sometimes happen in court.
Courtroom humor is important.
It is very important. It is very, very important in life. So I mean, you know, and this is something which we learn from judges, we learn from lawyers. We should all have the ability to laugh at ourselves, which is a lost talent in this country more increasingly. Abhi piche, I was before a judge and I was in the Supreme Court and one of the benches looked at me and said, Are, you're appearing on what side? I said, I'm for the victim. What happened? So, you're normally on the other side for the accused. So I said, sir, hum bepende ke lote hain, kisi side bhi gir jate hain. So the judge of course laughed and said, well, I will not say that for you. I said, no, don't worry, I'm saying it. Because, you know, as lawyers, you appear on all sides. Now, we must have the ability to laugh at ourselves in our follies. That's also part of the ability to maintain your temperament in court. Kai bari heated moments ho jate hain, kai bari jhagde ho jate hain.
That's where I was coming to. You mentioned that how today there is usually strong arguments and the aggressive tones start happening between the two opposite counsels. How to dilute that situation? Is it like a sly remark or a humorous?
I think it is always good to deflect things with a humor or just a casual comment. There's no point, you know, too much aggression. And it's not that, I mean, I fall prey to it also. I do make the mistake, but I have made a rule, at least in courts, if it's a matter with judges, I don't let myself lose my temper more than 2 times a year. If I feel very strong and I feel there is, you know, somebody making a statement which is unjust, only then will I react. Otherwise, one tries to deal with it with humor, with grace, with reason, with justification. Remember, a lawyer's job is to do their best. You're not going to win every case. And what is important is and some courts are very pleasant. You know, there are courts where you will always walk away with a smile because the judge has given you that hearing and at the same time been very pleasant about declining relief without wasting any time. The other day, I remember I was in one of the benches in the Supreme Court about a month ago, and the judge looked at me. I thought it was a decent case. He looked at me and said, the only good thing about this case is that you're appearing. Dismissed. So I said, can't I try and reason with you or make you listen? He said, not this one, Mr. Luthra, another one. So I tried for 2 minutes more, and then the client also realized that the judge had a certain view on the facts. So this is going to happen, especially in the Supreme Court where, you know, things move much faster at times. We must keep in mind that if I do 5 or 6 or 7 cases a day, the judge sitting on the pedestal, on the bench, has an experience of doing maybe 40 to 70 to 100 cases a day over a career of 15 to 20 years. So their worldview sometimes is much more informed than ours.
Right.
And sometimes, you know, as lawyers, we must realize we must not assume wrongly that judges' worldview is lesser than ours. It is often much larger. And that must be respected by a lawyer, because if we don't respect that aspect that the pen is in the hand of the judge and the judge is to write it, then we are being unfair to the system, to the profession, to the nobility of our profession, to advocacy, as also to the client.
True. How do you think the legal system, especially criminal system, gonna evolve, considering now how the sort of crimes which are committed has also changed with the development of technology, AI. You can now easily sitting anywhere. You could just change, make a new video where you might not be present there, but it's so realistic that you can't guess the difference between the two.
So with AI, there are two. You talked about AI. I'm going to tell you there are two levels of issues. Who will be culpable? Who will be guilty? Will the person who operates the AI, the creator of the AI program, or will it be the person who utilizes it? And to what extent will they both be liable? How do you share the liability? Secondly, jurisdictional challenges. Offences have a consequence in India while happening in some remote part of the world where our agencies don't necessarily have a reach. Even within India, because police is a state subject, these are issues of challenges. You get a service in India from a server in, let's say, Ireland, and a company incorporated in the US. Where will you reach? Because the information is in the server, but the company is in the USA. There are laws restricting disclosure of information. And how fast will you get those information even by MLAT? Or how effectively you will be able to do an investigation? So these are challenges. I think in the world that we are going into, we have to learn to be better listeners. And we have to realize that voices and alternate voices have to be heard, considered, and then reacted to. Of course, alternate voices doesn't mean screaming at the top of your voice and not willing to listen to my perspective.
Right.
One of the challenges I find is that are we, and I talk about myself, forget others, am I open to reason? Am I open to people's perspectives? Am I open to a point of view of you or any of your colleagues here? And sometimes, I believe as we grow more senior in our profession or older, we become more fossilized, which is our inability to learn from people who are youngsters. I'm not saying I'm a great guy, but I will tell you honestly, one of the times that I learned a lot in 97 when I was teaching, that was one of the first times I'd done my degree from Cambridge and I was practicing law and I went to my classes and my students would ask me questions which were fundamental. So a student asked a question and I enjoy relating this incident. So I was telling them about Arbitration Act and how injunctions can be granted. So they said, what are the principles behind it? So I rattled off the three principles: prima facie case, irreparable loss, balance of convenience. So I said, where did this come from? So I cited the Indian judgment of the 60s. So where did it come to the Indian law from? Is it in the CPC? No. Specifically, in fact, no. Where did it come from? It came from English law. How did it come into English law? And which part of English law? So I had to go back and actually realize I'd never thought of how these three were the only principles that got distilled over centuries in English law and then became a part of Indian law in many other countries. So you learn all the time. And if you are not willing to learn, then you're going to get fossilized. Satya jaoge.
So beyond courtrooms and once your case files are shut, who is Sidharth Luthra?
Beyond courtrooms, Sidharth Luthra is, I believe, a family man, a friend's man, and a person who likes to read eclectic stuff, who enjoys nature, who enjoys music, who enjoys non-law conversations.
I think next time we'll try to have a non-law conversation.
Sure, man.
Thank you so much for your time and your deep perspective. Thanks a lot.
It's my pleasure entirely.
Thank you, sir.